Welcome, Sanja, to LinkedIn Live. I do this try and do it weekly with my podcast guests. And we're here to talk about the podcast episode that we recorded together. Now, when we recorded this, it was, I don't want to say how long ago, but it was a good few months ago now. Yeah. But a fantastic conversation. And we released it maybe about a month ago or so. It could even be a little bit longer than that. But really, really great response from listeners as well. So I'm so delighted that we have the opportunity to do this, especially because I know that you have been sick over the last little while. For anyone who hasn't listened to the full podcast episode, so this is not the podcast episode. Sometimes people get confused. They think that the lives are the podcast itself. This is a LinkedIn Live as opposed to a podcast episode. So the full podcast episode is linked right below where you'll see this event. So maybe after the event or click into the comments, you can see the link to take you to the full episode where we had the most amazing discussion, ranging from things like authenticity at work and having bad bosses, how to bring your whole self to work, all of these different types of topics. So Sanja, do you want to maybe introduce yourself to listeners a little bit about who you are, what brought you on this journey, a little bit about what you do, and then we can go in and talk about some of the key points from the podcast.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me back. And yes, my pesky cough has kept me from having this conversation with you for a few weeks. So I'm so glad that we were able to reconnect. So my name is Sanja Licina. I'm actually sitting in beautiful Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I have been for the last 7.5 years. Still close to rounding up, almost 8. It'll be 8 in August. I'm originally from Serbia, and I spent about 20 years in the United States, and then just 2 in London. I wish it was more. I'll have to go back sometime.
I love London, I have to say.
Oh, yes,
great city. Anyone who's listening in London, yeah, I love it.
And so I'm the president of Workforce at QuestionPro. We dedicate all of our work to creating better connections with employees, helping organizations really listen with empathy, with compassion, collect data in such a way that they know how to action it, that they really truly know how to make a difference in people's lives. And so it's really this incredible intersection of my personal passion, having lived in so many different places and knowing how important those connections are, and really bringing that into my professional world. And I would have to say one of the things that I was really pleasantly surprised with after the podcast was the caption or the key takeaway that you teased out from our conversation. There was working smarter and not harder. And I thought, like you mentioned, we talked about so many different things, and I thought, wow, okay, like this is a really good angle that I don't often spend time emphasizing. And probably now, like it really made me realize it's important to do it more. And it's partly because of these competing priorities. So I have a 4.5-year-old who all of last year so graciously gifted me all of his little bugs that he brought from preschool.
Of course.
And this year I managed to find my own. He's been a lot healthier. I've been on the road more. I've been around people more, and I think I'm still building my immunity. And so I think in many ways our conversation around working smarter and not just harder stemmed from this survival mode. And I think it's something one of my leaders told me many years ago that resonated, but particularly today. And I think it's not only when we're not necessarily feeling well, but it's also all of us have the competing priorities, right? And I actually just downloaded Rob Cross's book about micro stressors because I'm like, this guy, I feel like he wrote it for me. I feel like I have so many different people and so many different things that I want to show up positively in my life. And sometimes I wonder how much of those different things I'm carrying. And so our time is limited, right? The impact that people like you, like me, that are so passionate about making the world a better place. It's like we have this infinite desire and a finite amount of time. And so I think to challenge ourselves always around how we're spending time and also how we surround ourselves with people that can help us really spend time in areas that we feel like we can make the greatest impact in is so incredibly important. So thank you so much. And I don't think I ever had an opportunity, so I'm taking it now to thank you, for highlighting that, because it was a really, really important self-reflection point for me. And in many ways, I'm hoping for individuals that are trying to figure out how to make it all work and trying to figure out how to show up, in different aspects of their lives, that it can be a filter that they take, as they're approaching their day, as they're approaching their weeks, to say, what do I really need to do? Where do I really invest my time? Where do I really need to excel? And to conserve that energy, because it's not just about running faster, it's about being thoughtful about it. So thank you so much for this platform. It's just that I loved our conversation and I loved your insight.
Absolutely. One of the things, now that we're talking, one of the things that really stood out for me during our conversation was the perception of other people. So as I recall, you were saying that other people were like, how do you, like, it looks like you can do it all. You're doing this, you're doing that. And actually presenting to the world that this is not the case at all. For the most part, what you see on social media, what you see, like, it's a promotion of what, it's people are showing the good stuff. They're not necessarily showing the messiness in the background, and not necessarily showing, like, whether there's breakdown in relationships or whether, what's actually going on behind the scenes. People don't get to necessarily see that. So, like, calling that out as, from the outside, it's fine. You might look at other people and think, oh, she's got it all sorted. She knows exactly what she's doing. But actually, the reality of what's going on the inside is quite different.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And sometimes I feel like, I mentioned to you, I'm a happy person. Like, what you see here is generally how I show up. And so, but it does not mean that life is perfect, my goodness. And sometimes I laugh at myself because all of us are learning, right? How to build relationships, how to build them, individuals like you and I have not been in the room together yet. Hopefully, maybe sometime.
When it's our well open to going back down to Buenos Aires.
Yes, anytime. And so for me, when I show up and I'm, I've gotten comments that I like really show up to meetings, whether it's like 8 or 9 in the morning or whenever, like, hi, how is everyone? And so I need to learn still if I'm overcorrecting or not. But like when you and I dialed in before we went live, one of the first things I told you is like, I'm literally sitting here with a jar of honey because my cough has come back and life needs to go on. But I thought, oh my goodness, like I really want to have this conversation. We only have so much time. It's the two of us. What if I go into a coughing fit? What's going to happen? But I'm making do, right? So sometimes, like, I've been joking with my friends and colleagues over the last week, like, I've had a series of mishaps, and I go share that. At first, like, randomly, I had an allergic reaction to antibiotics. Like, I've taken 100 antibiotics in my lifetime, and it's never happened. Yeah. And I tell people that, again, because it was something that was not pleasant that happened. It wasn't the end of the world. But if you see my face, you're like, oh, Sanja's doing great. I'm like, well.
Yeah, exactly.
It was my birthday. I was in the emergency room, like at the beginning of it. Like, not exactly. I had pastries before I went, so that's great. But it's not exactly like how you want to celebrate your special days. So it is that balance. And I think, I have a lot of conversations, to your point, about authenticity and bringing our authentic selves. And oh boy, I far know, what the balance is. And probably if you asked a lot of my friends and colleagues at the point, they'll be like, Sanja is definitely an overshare. Like, maybe we will be okay. We know a little less about her. But I'm trying to figure that out. I'm trying to figure out for others, how do I show up as someone that's like, I love what I do. I love my family. I feel like so incredibly lucky for different things. But at the same time, I work really hard at it. It's definitely that are not, bumps in the road. And how do I think about that? And I was thinking about, putting a quote out, like I'm sure somebody said this before, but my therapist said to me, you can't control things that happen to you in life. Bad things will happen. They'll happen to everyone, but you can control how you react to them. And so I have that in the back of my mind always, where like, if something happens, I'm like, okay. Sometimes it's a little explosion. Sometimes like, so don't let me fool you that I'm always so zen, but then it's that game plan of afterwards. And I think that's so important. And I think all of us need to figure out what works for ourselves. And I think the more we share ideas with each other, the more we know what to experiment with and see if it really resonates our own daily lives.
This is it. And I think the more people talk about it, and the more people who are open about what's going on in the background, without necessarily oversharing, and deciding who you get to share that with as well. And other people can feel privileged to hear those stories. So really, really brilliant, I think, from that perspective. I'd love to come back to something that you touched on earlier about QuestionPro and what QuestionPro does, because this is something I talk about a lot. When organizations are looking, like, what should we do? They often look, I think, to other organizations that they want to kind of emulate, or they want to copy what they do. But I always remind them it's much more important to listen to what people are saying in your own organization, and not necessarily copying what other people are doing, but then knowing what to do with that data that you have. So what information do you have from them? So it's, and again, not asking people questions and then ignoring the answers, which a lot of companies tend to do as well. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this. And I know you have an event coming up all around this topic of employee listening specifically. So I'd love to get your thoughts around that.
Yes. Well, that's why I smiled when we talked earlier and you said, you know, what, you have something coming up, and I said everything. And actually,
there's always something coming up.
There's always something. Because again, it's something that we're so passionate about, and I feel like there's still such a big difference that we can make. So my team and I, you know, we're always thinking about what else can we do, and how else can we share knowledge, and how else can we energize people to take action and encourage them. And so actually, we just released a new study that I'll put in. So if any of you are not connected with me, connect with me, please, on LinkedIn. I'm going to publish it today. We pushed it out 2 days ago, and we did a big study in the US, UK, and Germany around all of the, you know, what we believe are the most important components in the workforce today and in cultures, everything from well-being to diversity, equity, inclusion, to recognition, to training and development. And so we teased out, it's a huge study. It's a little bit of a lengthy report, and we didn't even put everything in it, but I think it gives organizations a really good base to understand, or to, you know, maybe some food for thought around what would be important for me to ask inside of my own organization. So to your point, it's not to say, well, this is a pain point, you know, across the globe, I need to do something about it. It's like, no, this is a pain point across the globe. Do I have the same challenge? One of the things that, you know, we're seeing is this big, you know, of course, more organizations are going through layoffs than they were months ago, than they were a year ago. And during this time, that's also very challenging. We often, you know, and I don't know if it's that we need to remind companies, I know that they know, but help them find ways to continue to stay well connected with employees that stayed and understand what it is that they need. And we're seeing a lot of things emerge around well-being, which is not that surprising, but also career development and feeling, you know, do I feel okay where I am today? What is my organization doing for me? So the data is very fresh. So amidst of all the changes, we're hoping, again, that this will give organizations food for thought for what do I ask inside of my own organization. But to your point, I think that listening to the market and what's going on and talking to other organizations can give you great ideas. Now, you need to vet and validate those ideas before you decide to make big bets, because every organization, every culture is different. Like, you and I have, as humans, a lot of overlapping passions, but we probably have a lot of things that we're different about. And that's what makes us unique and different. And that's the same for organizations. So if we're trying to emulate someone else, their culture might not be what we are. And if that's not the promise that we made to our employees, we'll be missing the mark, because we'll be delivering them something that they're like, but I'm not here for that. You promised me, you know, this autonomy and this transparency, but now you're giving me these kinds of perks, and it's not why I chose to be here. I don't understand what's going on. It's almost like a little bit of an identity crisis. So this whole study that we're doing, or that we did, is really a way to, again, ignite ideas for organizations to go have conversations with their own employees and understand, how am I doing in these areas and what's most important to prioritize? And then actually next week, like what day is it? What month is it? We're doing a workshop, a small one, with Al Adamson to talk about taking action on data in organizations, because that's one thing that, and Al Adamson is the founder and CEO of People Analytics and Future Work Community. And both
Shout out to Al. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Oh, he's just the most wonderful person. And so we're going to do a smaller workshop. It's going to be a pilot. And if it goes well, it's virtual. So if any of you are interested in joining, again, you can find it on one of my posts, and you can sign up. We want to have a smaller group of individuals to share amongst everybody, you know, what is it that I'm doing inside my organization? What are some things, some ways that I've taken action on data that have worked really well? And what are some things that I'm having a challenge with? And then share some of our ideas and experiments for ways that, you know, we have seen organizations do it well, and for people to share with each other. Because to your point earlier, we know that one of the worst things, you know, that can happen is somebody asks you and then nothing happens after. It's like I always think about in a relationship, like you ask your significant other and they tell you that they're just having, you know, a really tough time at work and they're really stressed, and you never ask anything after, you don't pick up anything at work. It's like, but I just
you
opened
just
up
asked me, and then you never did anything.
Yeah, like you didn't care. Like I don't even,
that's,
you know, acting like you never even asked.
but doing that is worse than not asking at all, because at least if you don't ask, there's no expectation. Whereas if you ask the question and someone shares examples or they share specifics about how work could be improved, how well-being can be improved, and then the organization does nothing, they're kind of setting an expectation that by asking that they're going to do something about it, then they do nothing. And then you might come and ask again. It's like, well, I'm not going to bother this time, because actually the last time you asked me and I shared, nothing happened. Nothing changed.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happens. And that's what, you know, many people call that survey fatigue.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's fatigue because people get asked too much. I think it's fatigue because people get tired that if even once they took the time and felt like something was going to really happen and then nothing happened afterwards, it's like you lose a little bit of trust in that relationship. You say, but you asked me, you made this promise, you'll do something, and nothing ever happened. Why would I believe you if you ask me again? And I think that's where organizations, like one of the conversations we have, and we'll discuss more in the workshop next week, is really, in some ways, when organizations do surveys, they'll do an assessment to see, well, you know, we have these 5 key pillars, and I need to get an understanding of how am I performing in different ones. I'm not really sure what I should prioritize. But only ask things that you can take action on. Like one, I've made a mistake before, and I remember my CEO looked at me and was like, Sanja, why'd you do that? I asked about pay satisfaction. Well, I'll tell you that based on research and my conversation with my colleagues, outside of even QuestionPro, nobody's ever happy with their pay. Like no one.
They always want more.
Yeah. And so if you ask that question, you're like, well, shoot, it's not like we can give everybody like 20% raise or 30, you know, whatever, depending on the market you're in. Sometimes that's cost of living. But, you know, and then I talked with my colleagues, you know, some other organizational psychologists outside of QuestionPro, and they had the same thing happen. They said, listen, like, this is a unanimous thing. Like, nobody's ever happy. You need to think about how you ask things around that, because unless, like, and pretty much no organization can just go give everybody huge increases, you need to get at it in different kind of ways. But long example short is really thinking about when you're asking people different things, you might not be able to act on everything. And I don't think your employees will expect you to act on everything, but you need to ask things that you know you can act on.
Exactly.
Out a few key things. And we're just next week, we're going to be sharing our actions at QuestionPro. Like we did our own internal survey, and we gave it a lot of thought, and we had a lot of back and forth with our CEO and COO, anything from systems to mentoring programs. Like we really took it to heart. And we'll go and share that. And again, we wanted to make sure to do a few really impactful things and tie it back to data from what employees told us. There's more opportunities for us. We can't grab everything, but we want to be very thoughtful about communicating why we selected certain things and how we hope, you know, that it's going to improve the culture and improve the lives of our employees inside.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to your earlier point of being thoughtful and prioritizing, and the fact that you can't do everything. You really can't do everything. On this pay specific thing, if I recall, when I was working in London about 15 years ago, thereabouts, I think that's, probably around that. And we had a similar thing, but when they were calling out the results of the survey, what they did in relation to pay was, well, no surprises there. Everyone says that the average is kind of like that people want to get paid more, that they're not happy with their pay. But compared to other organizations, we're not as unhappy with the pay as other organizations. And I thought, isn't that a clever way to approach that question? You know, so subtext.
Clever is probably a good word.
This is it. Sanja, before we wrap things up today, any kind of thoughts that you would like to share in relation to what stood out for you on the podcast, and any reasons that people should head over and listen to the full episode?
Yeah, I mean, again, all the conversations you have are just absolutely brilliant with all of your different guests. So I appreciate that. I would say a lot of us, I think, are doing soul searching right now. We continue to try, to figure out how to show up as our best selves, how to connect with people around us, both in a personal and a professional setting. So I would say whether you're an individual that's just trying to, get other ideas around how can I, do more with less? How can I be more satisfied with what I'm doing? Or if you're somebody that's, fortunate enough to have impact, well, everybody's fortunate enough to have impact on others inside of work, even individuals who are not in formal leadership positions. Maybe those who are in formal leadership positions by nature, can do a little more. But if that's something you're passionate about, if you're thinking about how can I show up as my best self to work every day, both for myself and to have a positive impact on others, I would say check out the episode. I hope we share a lot of our personal experiences, a lot of stories. And so I would hope that maybe you'll laugh a little bit with some of the stories, and that, more importantly, you'll get some ideas maybe for how to approach things differently.
And I think it would be relatable to a lot of people as well, what you shared. And if anyone would like to connect with Sanja, her details are above. We're broadcasting live onto LinkedIn, so just click on the link there, connect with her, look at some of the past posts that she has, especially about this upcoming employee listening that she's doing with Al Adamson as well. And thanks everyone who tuned in live today. If anyone's watching the replay or you're watching live, feel free to leave a comment below what you thought of the full episode, any questions or thoughts that you have for myself or Sanja. So really appreciate your time again today, Sanja. Thanks. As always, absolutely loved chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to catching up again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was a huge pleasure as always. And thank you everybody for joining.